Hero of Leaf Valley is a remake of Save the Homeland, a game that was infamous in Harvest Moon because despite being in 3D, it still didn't let you get married for no reason. That makes it look like it was either rushed or cluelessly made. From my research, all the differences it has from it are positive, aside from load times. And I don't even mind the loading length, it barely lasts any amount of time at all. I guess what was meant was the load times are a lot more frequent because of how stupidly segmented the level design is. And that is a minor annoyance, but it's worth all the positives. The remake is the same experience as the original game, but with stuff added to it. So I'm experiencing that game through this one, so there's no point in talking about it. There was a point with Back to Nature because it did have some things over the remake, and it was in the golden age, so I knew it'd be more likely to be good than something new after I played Sunshine Islands. So I wanted to play a good Harvest Moon game that I never played before. With this one's reputation, I'm better off just seeing two games at once, instead of making two separate reviews. Now, how do I feel about it? Well, here's my impression right from the start. The main character looks terrible. And when I finally got control of my character, I thought, oh no. Because it's a 3D game like A Wonderful Life was, which means it's even harder to memorize the level design because the camera keeps turning. It's also confusing that there's two buildings in my farm that are shaped like a house, and are the same size. So in the first season, every so often I'd go into the white building thinking it was my house, because neither building looks memorable at all. I wish the white building was just contained within your house in the back of it. The game makes it even harder because you can't see what direction you're facing when on the map screen. So you're reliant on the mini-map when desperately trying to figure out how to go all the way to the goddess spring that's as far as possible from the farm. This game's the first one to have a stamina bar, but it didn't need one, because you do an animation as soon as you run out of stamina, and they don't have fainting in this game. It's nice to have a stamina bar so you have a better idea of how much stamina you're using up. Personally, I wish it was green instead of blue. It's nice that I start with seeds again, even if it is the wrong kind of seed. But still, this game is off-putting. I pressed a button that I thought was for going into the menu, and I wasn't shown an option to see my items and tools. I just got asked which animal I wanted to whistle for, when I didn't press the shoulder button. The first couple days of the game, trying to get that menu up was the most unresponsive thing in the world. It took me a few days in game for me to realize that I had to hold the button down for a second before it'd be guaranteed to show up. And there's no way to instantly switch tools either. It's not like time is that fast that you'd need the extra second saved. I had to look up that you need to combine the rucksack button with a D-pad press in the right direction to get to the tools. I was expected to move the camera with the D-pad, because the PSP didn't have a proper equivalent to the camera stick. So that feels weird. Glad I can change it. And you also start with only 120G. I don't remember ever starting out with so little money before. I immediately hated that the shops weren't open right away because they're so close to my farm. The level design last game is better because you could do all the foraging in a different place than the town. So by the time you go to town, all the stores would be open. Past the first day doesn't really matter, because you're going to take so long watering your crops that you're going to be able to get into any store you want by then. It's weird that I can't buy or sell something by talking to the store manager from across the counter. And instead I have to stand in front of this paper on the desk. They seriously didn't think that'd throw anyone off? I like the character designs, from how all the bachelorettes are noticeably good looking, and this is the first game where they're all outright attractive, to the nostalgia of the fact that some of these characters came back in Magical Melody. For a few of them, it's a lot weirder to see them when they're not in an embarrassingly kiddie, chibi art style. Bob is scary looking, but usually they look better. Not only did I see that it didn't really matter how little money I started with because the seeds were selling for way cheaper than I thought, but I didn't appreciate that too much because I was overwhelmed by all the options I was given. If I hadn't done any research, I would have simply bought breadfruit because it was the most expensive seed and also multi-harvest. But I was worried because the description said breadfruit was fragile. So I searched on the internet and couldn't for the life of me find out why it was fragile. So it shouldn't have said that. I looked up the guide to save the homeland, and it has less seeds to sell in the shop. It sells the least amount of seeds there's ever been available in the franchise, which keeps you from agonizing over what to buy. With this game, I end up looking up a guide's crop list to take forever figuring out which crops were the best one for each season, because there's no guide entirely dedicated to telling you that for either of the games. Why wouldn't a guide tell you the most important thing? But yeah, it's stupid that breadfruit is even an option. It's one of those crops that you can't sell for a wanted item price. So in the first harvest, all you can do is break even with them. Then why are they sold for the largest price? You'd expect that from the most valuable crop. I couldn't find any information on how to sell bugs. It's nice that it's in the game so you can get more money in the spring earlier. But it would be better designed to have more forageables that are worth more than 10G. Selling bugs and the tree hammering is exclusive to the remake. It's great that I can hit trees with a hammer to get stuff to sell, that's creative and new. But you use up way too much stamina from it. The hammer is not supposed to use any more stamina than the rest of the tools. And most of the time you only get bugs. And it's completely random whether you get bugs or fruit. If you get bugs, it's hardly worth the effort. Why is it that the fruit trees don't always look different from the bug trees? And even the fruit trees can give you bugs. How am I supposed to memorize the best trees in a 3D game where the camera isn't always one way when they all look the same? You know what sucks the most about selling bugs? The risk of accidentally throwing the bug and losing it because it won't stay the fuck still. Now I know why Wonderful Life made this impossible. For the longest time, I didn't know I could have an easier time selling him bugs by talking to him in his house past 5. Because I didn't know where he lived. Eventually I found out that the game doesn't even do shipping right. Not only is there no shipping bin in front of the house, but you can't even simply make a phone call from your house. You have to go all the way to a store to sell your stuff. That reminds me of RPGs like Sword of Mana. You can only sell specific items to specific stores. And it's only slightly based on what store it is. The very fact that you can still sell random shit like herbs to the tool shop is confusing. How would you ever know that? Boy, items better stack in your bag. Imagine having to go all the way to the store every time you put a couple of crops in your bag. Awesome, they do stack. But I'd rather be able to just put something in a basket to sell it. For the highest price possible. They separate wanted items and sell into separate menus. When sell is the thing you'd go into first. Wanted items is something you've never seen before, so you're not as tempted to go into it right away as you are with sell, which is something you're familiar with from RPGs. So the first time you ever sell things, you're probably going to do it from the sell option. When something you want to sell in the sell menu is a wanted item, the game doesn't tell you that. And you could get ripped off selling it for the sell price if you didn't already know from a guide or checking every single store's wanted item list that it's a wanted item. They really want it to be as convoluted as possible. Because they don't even have the same wanted items for every shop for the entire year. Some of their wanted items are not stuff that are only seasonal. The normal price for strawberries is only 10G above their seed price. So you're forced into taking advantage of the fact that some stores want crops at higher prices to make good money off farming. It's so lame that the only way to make the maximum amount of money off strawberries is to sell them in the winter. Why didn't they have it at the max money amount in the spring? Also, there's a delivery request in stores, and that word does nothing to tell you that it means wanted items too, requests. I would assume it means you are the one requesting the delivery. The request can actually trick you into selling stuff for less than the amount of money you would have gotten by selling it for a wanted item price. So you have to bring out a calculator to see if the requests are going to rip you off. They could have told you when you were using the sell option that they would pay more than others for certain items. They had enough room on the screen. I was selling all the bugs to Tim because he's the bug guy. Apparently I wasn't supposed to do that. I was supposed to be selling the caterpillars to the inventor of all people. And that would have been better gameplay, because you have to sell stuff to Tim one at a time. The game was tricking me into selling herbs to the seed shop, because the seed shop is about stuff that grows in the ground. On the first days of the game, I couldn't get a part-time work option to come up. Only a guide told me I could wish for stamina restoration by giving an offering to the goddess. But she only does that once a day for no reason. Well, you can use the hot spring as many times as you want in the games that have a hot spring. This still sucks because you'd have to sacrifice potential profit for it. Because the Harvest Goddess is such a prissy in this game, she doesn't accept anything that's not food as an offering. I mean, she takes it from you, but she's completely useless afterwards. Doesn't she want the homeland to get saved? Oh, apparently I have to do that between 10 and 4 p.m. I did that! Oh, it turns out she doesn't do it if you throw her something that isn't food or herbs. Because somehow she doesn't consider an herb to be food. And neither does the toolbox. This can have you confused into only wasting crops. At least she warns you that she doesn't want you to go to her too early. But that warning would have been a lot more useful before I wasted my offering. The first day, it took me past 4 p.m. for me to get to her because I was still getting used to the overworld. The repetitive level design of the plaza certainly doesn't help. And also has to be on a sunny day, because apparently this goddess is such a prissy that she hates being in the rain. I'd expect the Harvest Goddess to be appreciative of the rain, because it waters the crops. The goddess doesn't do any wish granting if you throw a fish in the spring. And apparently she counts clams as fish too. What a prima donna. The fact that it takes forever to sell all of your items and you have to memorize where to sell them is the worst thing about this game. At least you'd think that would be the worst thing about the game. When you first start playing, you have no way of knowing that there's no way to upgrade your watering can. Even in the remake, you can ask Lewis about tool upgrades, but the watering can isn't an option, when that's common sense that's the first thing you'd want upgraded. So the second worst thing about this game is you can only plant one crop at a time instead of 9 at a time like usual. But that's not all. The tools in this game never affect more than one tile at a time, no matter how much you upgrade them. You'd think that would be common sense to program. If they realize we want tool upgrades, why wouldn't they realize this? So because you can only plant and take care of one crop at a time, the pacing of the game is 8 times slower for no reason. Doesn't make it a terrible game. It only feels like it when I was just starting out, constantly going to the wrong pathways while foraging. Well, I do think the controls for walking around when you're watering are fine. I love that I can walk over crops, so I can plant them wherever I want to get a lot more money. The way this game handles stores is a lot more inconvenient than having to make cows pregnant to make them useful again, because by the time you have to do that, you already bought everything anyways. A Wonderful Life did everything it could to hold your hand in the other areas to try to make up for farming. It also made it obvious why it was being realistic with the farming, by having cows only give milk after giving birth, which made it clear that its mission statement was being a realistic farming game. But if this is the only thing about the game that's being realistic, it makes it look extremely arbitrary that it does that. It deliberately got rid of what's good about its precursor with the excuse of challenge. There's nothing you can think of and do to overcome it and feel skilled. It's just that the farming is kept at its most boring beginning state for no reason. If the reason is realism because it's a 3D game, that's stupid because realism goes out the window as soon as you see the harvest sprites. Speaking of the watering can, it holds a third as much water as it did in the previous games. Why? There's nothing challenging about filling it up with water. What's fun about having to fill it up with water twice every time you do any farming? The fact that farming is like this, even in the remake, means it's just one of those remakes I've got no respect for that just adds bells and whistles to distract you and do nothing to improve the gameplay loop. At that point, the fact that you can grow crops in the winter outside doesn't make up for it. Of course, you could do that in the original too. So it didn't do anything to actually fix the game. Just give you the superficial fix so you can get married after 3 years going through the worst game in the series at that point. It's not even 3 years, you have to wait over 2 weeks as well. Even rainy days suck in this game, because seeds can be washed away by the rain, which I never saw happen in Back to Nature. Surprisingly, even seeds that weren't planted that very day can get washed away. Which means the game randomly destroys some of your crops to punish you for something that you had no control over. It's Sunshine Islands before Sunshine Islands. That's bullshit. It's like every season has a typhoon in it, except to make up for it you can go outside any day of the year. This just pads out the game. In the last week of the month, it's raining the whole time, but I love that because you won't have any crops that are still seeds at that point. The game's so mean that water isn't even free to buy from the restaurants. It's supposed to be, but in this game it's 50G. So I said, oh no again. I could understand if they did this because tool usage upgrades tools, and this is to keep you from maxing them in one day again. But there is no tool experience in this game. You have the first spring farming experience for the whole entire game. That's what a bad ripoff of the series would do that doesn't understand what was great about it. I don't even appreciate the smaller stamina use, because it's just fixing a problem that they added in the first place. Because it doesn't even feel like it should be normal for the hoe to do that much stamina use against you. It's supposed to only use up 2 stamina points. But I love that you can't water anything but a tilled plot or soil that isn't watered. So you don't waste water and stamina by accident. It rarely comes in handy, but when it does, it's another way the game's ahead of its time. But I do find it a little condescending that they think you need to have a blue square to farm correctly. Oh, of course the harvest sprites in this game don't do anything for me when I talk to them outside. If you just play Back to Nature, how are you supposed to know that? You're only gonna assume that if you have no faith in the game because you think it sucks. I thought it was a reasonable assumption that the sprites would be useless. Why would they make the game go by even faster by having the sprites do all your farming? People already decided to bitch about the short length of Save the Homeland. Oh no, the worst game in the series goes by too quickly. I want to suffer with the worst game in the series for 60 plus hours. The game brings back the dog bowl from Harvest Moon 64, but this time you have to keep putting food in it until the dog you want shows up. And then you have to keep doing that. And only then will you be able to adopt it. The game doesn't tell you why you should even bother using the dog bowl, when usually the dog's worthless in practice. So we only did it because a guide told me what the dog was for. And how are you supposed to know how many dogs there are so you won't turn down all of them? There's only 2 of them, and they're the same type and color that A Wonderful Life has. Except I don't like the way either of them look, because they're both too big. So they look too old. Why can't you have a cute dog? This could have been interesting if there were a lot more types. But if there's only 2 types to choose from, I'm like, why did you even bother? The fact that you're still raising affection with the dog by feeding it before it's adopted, all that amounts to is that the game wastes your time by asking if you'd like to adopt him, and arbitrarily doesn't let you raise its affection by picking it up for a long time. Nor can you whistle for it, which apparently raises its affection, so they had no excuse for not having a heart show up over it. All to pad out getting the power berries with your dog, even though it's the beginning where you need them the most. At first I had no idea how to use the ocarina. That's how bad the game design is. He just instantly puts it away for no reason. I've been using every direction possible and I can't stop him, and there's no description for it on the item menu telling you how to use it. And the tool shop doesn't tell you how to use it either. It took a while for me to find out that I have to keep holding down the button to keep it equipped. The game design is so bad that you have to wait for your character to finish playing one of the notes before you can play the other notes successfully. Wouldn't it be much faster if you could just go down, left, up, and instantly do it? So if you're playing the game on mute, well, you're going to be really thankful that your character's head moves when he's playing. So the animation still makes it obvious that he's playing the note and when he stopped it. It's so stupid that the only way you can look up the melodies is to look up a guide. They give you a tutorial for farming, but not this. It takes forever to figure out. Maybe he's just sitting there because in this area there isn't a power berry. But to say something minor that's good for a second, I like that all I have to do to adopt the pet is try to pick him up. I don't have to sit through a cutscene first at the start of the day and mash A through text. Well, it's creative that you have to use a musical instrument to train your dog. And I love that it's an ocarina used in the remake because it reminds me of Zelda. Having to take weeks to be able to train the dog just pointlessly pads out getting a dog instead of you already having one, which is especially cruel when you need him to get power berries. And I mean every power berry. This is the first game in the series, and hopefully the only one, where you can't get any of the power berries for free. You have to buy the ocarina before you can get them. This is easily the game that handles power berries the worst. There's only 4 of them. It's random where you can find them. And it's handled the least creatively of all of the games, because all of the power berries are found the exact same way. This is the first game in the series, and hopefully the only one where you can't get any power berries until months later, because of how long it takes to get the dog to even 2 hearts, which I've heard is a minimum amount that you need to get a power berry. It's not more challenging, it's just more annoying. I sure would like to get a horse to go through the world map faster. I went through all of it and still didn't get handed one. You have no way of knowing this. You can get a horse for free if you do part-time work at the ranch specifically, and you do it enough times at the first spring of the game specifically. So if you do it enough times that Bob likes you enough, he'll give you a horse in the summer. And they determine which horse to get you based on which ones you brushed first the most. But the one you brush first the most is the one that's closest to you. That's not necessarily going to be your favorite horse. Why can't you just pick whatever color horse you want? That's the only way to get a different color horse than the one you buy. Why would they downgrade it from Harvest Moon 3? It's nice that you can get colored horses again. The previous game was pretty lazy by having one color scheme for the cows. At least it's the first game where you get a fully grown horse. But when I first played the game, I just couldn't get Bob to offer me part-time work. So by the time I was constantly working for him, it was too late to get the horse. So I spent the entire game without a horse because I didn't want to buy it. At least this is the first game in the series where you can ride the horse all over the overworld. But that's common sense. The improvements in this game are common sense. They don't seem like they took a lot of effort to come up with. How the hell are you supposed to know which place to do part-time work at? I had to constantly alternate between the guide of game FAQs and the walkthrough on IGN. And that's the one that was the most helpful. Why isn't it pay by the hour for all the jobs, like in the Wii games? The game's too poorly programmed to tell you on the poster that the part-time job for the ranch is the best paying job because it pays 100 G an hour. Why are all of the part-time work options but Ronald's closed just because it's raining? Part-time work is something you discover by accident if you keep accidentally trying to buy stuff the normal way instead of the way the game makes you do it. But that took a while for me to be able to do. I talked to Bob and I went to the paper on his desk and I didn't see an option for work. I tried looking it up and that didn't help. I've been talking to the people over the counter at the right times. My game must be glitched, so that it's impossible to do part-time work until later in the first spring. Because nowhere in the guides does it say that you can only do part-time work after a certain point in the first spring. Ronald always tells me how to do his part-time work, even though it didn't need explaining the first time. So that's either clueless or even more intentional padding. Like how I have to go through 2 text boxes from Woody every time you ask to go to the forest. Then acts as if this is the first time he's offering you the chance to cut lumber yourself. I thought working for Ronald's grocery store would involve being a beggar, and that'd have been an interesting change of pace for a farming game. I'd expect chickens to be part of Bob's part-time work, but I'm glad they aren't, because then it'd take even longer. Because chicken feed's finally a tool again, the pacing of feeding chickens is a lot faster. Too bad it's too easy to pick up a chicken by accident. Why can't I do that when my back is to one? Why is it way too easy to make the game think you're trying to end the job, even when you're not even facing the door? And yes, it's the default option. You end up with an egg as your reward for helping Ronald, so that's a free chicken that you never knew you could have gotten before you did it. Why does part-time work not have the same hours as the store hours? What's confusing is that it has the same hours as the store hours with the ranch. Anybody would assume that's a part-time hour poster. Only the remake has the mine. And for no reason, you're forced to do part-time work to unlock it first, for 5 days. And what makes it feel incredibly forced is that it's not like you can't go in the mine. Your character just thinks he shouldn't touch the stuff in the mine for no reason. It's not like he was ever told not to, so how would he know not to? At least working at the mine is the first thing you'd think to do to try to unlock it, so it is intuitive. And apparently the lumberjack hates getting customers so much that it'll only let you give him business if you choose to work for him a couple of times. Since you can't give him business until you have enough lumber, and you can only get lumber after you work for him enough times, because then he lets you get some. Why does it take so long to get into position to cut the tree? It's like every time he forgets where he put his axe. It makes him look amazingly incompetent. Why does he take so long, and why does he use up so much stamina? The worst part though is that somehow cutting a whole small tree down only gets you 1 lumber piece. Even the 8-bit games knew to give you more than 3 lumbers from a stump. Because it's not a branch. What the hell kind of Harvest Moon game forces you to pick up the lumber from the ground? But at least time is frozen the whole time you're in the forest. That makes up for having to ask His Highness for permission to go to the forest. No, it doesn't. Why can't I cut down this orange tree? I had to find out from a forum post that the longer you go between cutting trees, the bigger they're gonna get for you, and the biggest trees give you 7 lumber. Why couldn't I just get that in the first place? So apparently the game is secretly doing me a favor by constantly cheating me out of lumbering for no reason, because it has this fucked up system instead of simply having all of the trees producing 7 lumber like the stumps in the previous game already did. Why not keep it simple and let me cut down all the trees outside the forest? Just have them grow back every day. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. Neither do infinitely respawning stumps. How in the world was I supposed to know this when in every other game the sources of lumber either respawn from a screen transition or daily? It feels pretentious because it's pretending to do it to be realistic, but there's nothing realistic about a whole tree growing in just a week. Lumbering didn't exist in Save the Homeland. They were smart enough to spare you from that. The remake came after Animal Parade. Why does it feel like it's completely behind and backwards compared to that game? One of the part-time jobs includes Martha's recipe requests, which of course gives you no hint about how to cook them. It's nice that you can keep the extra ingredients from it. Here's some really minor compliments while I'm at it. I love that the clock on screen tells you the exact second. And I love that there's an instant transition to the next day after you sleep, considering that in Friends in Mineral Town it takes too long. I was shocked to find out that the barn only has enough space for 3 at the start, the lowest number in the series. That's the case for the coop too, and the upgrade only ups that to 5. Why would you need an upgrade to get it to the point where it's supposed to be in the first place? Well, it's great for the pacing of ranching in the short term. Cool, you can put items in your toolbox. So I do have a place to put the grass. That's good, because the game's so primitively designed that you can't put more than 1 stack of the same type of item in anything. It's so stupid because there's nothing you can do with grass. It's practically worthless until you get something that can transform it into something. Back to Nature let you have multiple stacks of the same type of item in the fridge or whatever. Why would they go back on that? It's inconvenient that you can't put a tool you have equipped in the toolbox. And if it's supposed to be a toolbox first and foremost, well, it's convenient that items is the default option, because most of the time the only thing you'll use the toolbox for is putting grass in it, because you have more than enough space for all of your tools. It's a huge relief that you can do things so that you don't have to pay 50,000 G just to avoid the bad ending. It turns out there's a time limit to getting an alternative ending done. If you don't get an event for saving the town done in time, you'll lose the chance. Most of the events trigger naturally in front of your house if you befriended certain people enough. So it's only obtuse if you had to befriend someone who's not a bachelorette. It still requires a guide. Every alternative ending has something god dang it about it. Good thing there's tons of different ways to get a good ending. Why did it take so long for the game to let me work at the mine? I was going there at the right time other times. It's so stupid that you have to get there before 1 PM. Because my usual routine doesn't have me getting there that early, because of how ridiculously far away the mine is. I had to buy the fishing rod in this game. You need the medium rucksack a lot more. At least you start out with more inventory space this time. This is the first game where you can't catch big fish with a fishing rod right from the start. First of all, you're not allowed to simply fish wherever you want, so there's no reason for that. But then it's not as simple as just casting the rod and getting it into the lake immediately. You have to waste time choosing a spot with fish in it. But then, you get overwhelmed by this vertical bar that acts like you have the time pressing the button right. So am I supposed to press it when it's at the top or at the bottom? Why can't I just go up and down with the control stick to aim it up or down, and have that determine the distance I cast it? The worst part is that you're told to press the button when the circles overlap, which looks completely luck-based to time rate, and you have to do that multiple times. How are you supposed to do this right? I can't catch a single fish with this. This is the worst fishing in the entire franchise. Even Big the Cat fishing is more playable than this. I can't imagine the one programming this was actually trying to make something fun. All I can imagine is that he thought fishing would be too broken and made it impossible for balance. Because if it was playable, it'd be fun, and then you would do nothing but fish. There's no excuse for doing fishing this way when it's been done better. It just wastes hours in game. Even if I did get the timing right, it still wouldn't be fun because it takes forever. Why does hitting a rock take too long? Well, that ruined mining. With the red rocks, you can press the X button in front of them to see the direction of its explosion, which breaks the other rocks. And that's the only way to break yellow rocks, so that's lame. Why do you have to press the cancel button to grab them of all things? I'd expect it to be the talk button. It's convenient that when you use the control stick after that, you move around the rock, so you can push it in a different direction faster. I wish Zelda did it like this. The tutorial pads itself out by forcing you to push the rock all the way to the area you're supposed to take it to before you're allowed to stop pushing it. I hope the game doesn't make this unnecessary take forever pushing stuff to use the explosions push puzzle mandatory for mining. I'd rather just hit the rocks. This has potential to make mining interesting, but it fails because you don't just pick up the yellow rocks and run with them. You take forever to get them where you want. This combines with the character being a massive wimp with a hammer. And this is really boring. I'm not going to make the game take forever to beat by mining when I hate it. But I love that every time you do the mining tutorial, your stamina bar gets filled up to full from what it was after it's done. It makes me wish they would just refill your stamina bar from you choosing to mine without the tutorial, because I hate doing it. I'm conflicted on you not being able to do the tutorial anymore when you can do mining yourself. So the free stamina trick is gone. But it would suck if you had to do this tutorial every day. I also hate that the cafe is only open past 11, because I go past it when rushing to the mine.